when you look at the chapter before that, you find that in 2 Samuel 8, it describes the victories that David had. You see that in verse 1, it says, in the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. The Philistines were always the eternal enemy of Israel, often out to harass them. And you find that in the very first verse of 2 Samuel 8, it says, in the course of time, David defeated the Philistines. And it's not just defeating the Philistines. You find a little bit later in the verse 2, it says, he also defeated the Moabites. Yeah, and they became his subjects, and not just his subjects, but the subjects of Israel too. And I like the verse 3 and 4, because when it comes to verse 3 and 4, it really tells you the extent of his kingdom. And so he defeated the king of Zobah, and including the territories. And what's interesting about verse 4, which describes the defeat of Zobah, is that he captured 1,000 chariots and 7,000 charioteers and 20,000 foot soldiers. Now, for a while, you kind of be thinking, we don't see chariots here. Maybe you go into Chinatown, you go along middle of the road, and then you see a trishaw. Okay, and that's a kind of a two-wheeler a 2 or 3-wheeler that you think about that may be part of a chariot. But chariots in those days was like their tanks. Yeah, so he had like 1,000 tanks. So if you're Ukrainian today and you can drive a tank, wow, it's wonderful, isn't it? Because you can defend and win back your country and give and have the freedom. I realize that then your mind begin to wonder is, hey, 1,000 chariots, 1,000 tanks, but there were 7,000 charioteers. Wow. Well, of course, if you are in the tank and you're running a tank, you need a lot of people to service up. One to drive the direction in which you're going. You need others to be able to point out where the enemy is, where for you to shoot and attack as well. And so they have 7,000 charioteers. And of course, you need the foot soldiers to come along. And you find that that's not the end of the story. You find that the Arameans came, so were they squashed. And I like verse 6, because verse 6 tells us that, hey, the Lord gave David victory wherever he went. And then he goes on to say that, David became famous when he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites. And then you find in verse 14, the Lord underlined the authority, the winsomeness of David. And he says, yes, the Lord gave David victory wherever he went. Isn't it nice? That for you, as you go out to work in whatever the situation that you're in, whether it's doing research in SUTD, whether you are, a lawyer, or whether you're a stay-home mom or dad, or the things that you need to be doing. Yeah, some of you are laughing. Yeah. So whatever the role that the Lord has given to you, God grants you victory. It's wonderful, and you're doing particularly well. But that's kind of setting, but that's not the all end. Be it all end. You find that the setting goes on to tell us in verse 15 downwards. It says that David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. And you must imagine for yourself that he is the second king. Saul was the first king. And so as they begin to exert their existence in the land of Israel, there were important things for them because they were quite often being attacked for the very fact that they were small and a minute group of people. And so now, as they expand and conquer territories and gain better reputation, people became to be more respectful of Israel itself. And then you find that as he does that, there was a certain thing that David was doing. He had with him Joab, the son of Zeruiah, who was over the army, the Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, who was the recorder, Zadok, the son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, who were priests, and Sariah was a secretary, and it goes on to say, Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, so on and so forth, and David's sons were priests. As you kind of look at that for a while, you could see that there was a reorganization of his administration. It was just as they were growing up and doing well, you need a better way to manage and run the country in which you've been given. And so he needed to appoint a chief of staff because it's important. If you don't have a chief of staff, you will be vulnerable in a place where you're quite exposed. And so he had Joab, who's in charge to take care of that. And then he had someone who was a recorder. Yeah, very much in our minds as somebody who is perhaps recording down things, isn't it? Like a historian who tells you what's happening in the day. But they are important things, being a historian. Because in those days, you want to start to form and plan laws and ideas, you need to actually be writing down what are the things that happened before and how you make decisions based on the case study being brought before you. And so the role of the recorder is very much like a chancellor, a person who listens, finds out the complaints and the petitions that they will bring to the king to say, hey, this is not doing well, my HDB flat, it's leaking, water's coming down because of the rain, or it's too hot, it's too small. Yeah, and so the recorder would take that down, bring it before the king, and then they will discuss among the wise people and come up with the answers. So although it appears with an ancient name and an ancient title like that as a recorder, he had a very important function, very much like the chancellor that runs the place. And then it's interesting, if you look a little bit very carefully, is that the order in which he chooses to name the important people in his administration. Army, very important. Recorder, very important. And the third among them was priests. Isn't it exciting? Isn't it good that he taught and recognized the place of spiritual leadership and what spirituality could mean for his people of Israel. And so he appointed priests, and there were quite a few of them. And then you find that he appointed also a secretary, and in those days, the secretary was much more like the prime minister, where their new ideas had come into place when they thought about what they should be doing and wanting to do trade and so forth. So it's not about listening to complaints, but this time this is a much more proactive way of intentionality of what they want to do. Then the prime minister comes about, and then he plans it, and then he executes it for the welfare of the people around him. Do you get the kind of picture? So now, are you comfortable? Are you seated comfortably? Your back is not hurting you, and you're all right? Good, that's wonderful. So the question I want to ask you is that if you are among them with David, what would you be thinking of? What would you be wanting to do next? Since you've won wars and you are undefeated almost, what would you be doing? What would you be thinking? Come on, anybody. I like to see my dear brother wearing blue right at the back, my favorite shirt color. Yes, please. I don't know. I have no idea. Can you tell me? Wow, tak boleh啦，这样不可以啦。呀，要给我一点机会嘛。哎呀，是。Well, but let's just think for yourself. Thinking that if you have not read about the story itself, what would you want to do? Yeah.
I'll be thinking of which other countries or territories I can conquer and oppress.
Very ambitious, wonderful, great, important, because otherwise, there'll always be dynasties that come along and it's going to threaten you as well. Yeah, what else? Build nice house, wonderful, no more HDB, yeah, great condos, you're going to build great swimming pools to come with, plenty of space for your dog to run, right? And sometimes the question would be, instead of what would you do in a time like this, sometimes we need to ask, what would God want you to do in these moments? What would God expect you to do? And just to understand the story, which our dear brother has read ahead of us, um, David had a thought, and the thought was ringing in his ears, and it kind of affected him for a long time. And we find that in verse 1, it tells us what was on his mind. David asks, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I should show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Right. So at a time when things were doing extremely well, at a time when things were prosperous for him, at a time in which land and place was peaceful, he thought about a friend of his. The background relationship between the two of them was that they were best friends. We find that in 1 Samuel 18, verse 1 and 3, gives a glimpse of how well they knitted themselves. They had a way of understanding, playing, fighting, standing shoulder to shoulder with each other. And to the point that, it says here, when David finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one spirit with David and he loved him. They were like brothers, even though not of the same true fathers. Jonathan often would defend David against his father, much to his father's annoyance. And yet he never gave up. And for that, David repaid him back. There were occasions and times because Saul, who was jealous of David, was seeking to kill and slaughter him. And when David had the upper hand and the opportunity to do so, David was reluctant, was hesitant. And in fact, all the opportunities given to him, he never took it at all. Simply because of his great relationship he had with David. And I think that was important. It came to a point in which they established a covenant between the two of them, to how that they would look after each other. And I think that's a good lesson for us to be thinking, isn't it? How are your friendships like? Are your friendships your friendships that you have at kindergarten still alive and well today? I'm just asking. Don't have to acknowledge it. It's okay. Are the friendships you had in primary school still there for you? Are the friendships you had that you made in your first job that you have gone to work in, are they still for you and with you? I don't know. Sometimes it may not be like that. Sometimes things are not as always as clear as it can be or as we wished ourselves. But I think what's important is David's question. Now, David's question was persistent. Find in verse 1, he says that, is there anyone still left in the house of Saul to whom I shall show kindness? Now, he repeated that because he felt it was very important. But we notice that when he repeats it, the recorder puts it in a very different way. In fact, it gives us a true indication of something of a much higher order. First of all, we find that, although he recognizes that the house of David would mean, the house of Saul would mean that would be Jonathan, who is the son. And so he says that it's not just about extending kindness, my dear brother. It's the kindness, his kindness, David's kindness to his friends' descendants. But you notice in verse 3, in the persistent thought that he had, he thought much deeper. It's not just what is expected of me, in which I myself, as a person who has a covenant friendship with my friend who has now gone ahead of me, but I don't only want to show kindness to him, but I want to deliver the kindness of God to him. The kindness of God to him. That's a lot different, isn't it? Huh? If I want to show you, okay, I want to show you friendship. Okay, this kind of friendship. But if I want to offer you the friendship of the Lord, it's got to be more than the level in which we are in. It must be beyond the normal understanding. It must be much, it would include really understanding your needs, your concerns, sitting down, finding time, exploring that, and then helping you fulfill it and receiving it. And that's exactly the kind of thought that David had persistently in his mind and in his thinking. And so the story goes on, and we find that uh, so David asked the question, and as his voice rings out in the courtyard, the people go around and say, "Yes, there is a servant from the household. His name is Ziba." And so they invited this guy very quickly, and this guy turns up and say, "Are you Ziba?" David asked. And so, "At your service." Wow, that's great, quick response. And so the conversation that David had with Ziba goes something like this. Yeah, I want to show kindness, God's kindness to someone in house of Saul. And then Ziba immediately answered, there is still a son of Jonathan. He's lame in both feet. And immediately as David hears that, he asks the very question, where is he? And as quickly as the question has been asked, the answer came. He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Debar. Well, friends, I just want you to join me for a while as we explore the received answers that David was asking. First, there is still a son of Jonathan. Yeah, there is. Is there somebody else that is around that we can call upon, that we can look, we can search and find? There is. But do you notice something? There has been no name, a nameless son. Even though the king asked the question twice, no name. Second thing is, David, the king who asked that important question, received an answer, and the answer has been told that, hey, by the way, the friend that you're looking for, whoever that you want, he is lame in not 1 foot, but 2 feet. I wonder, any of you have had ache pains before on your leg? I suffered once from my Achilles heel tendon kind of froze for a while. So it was difficult for me to walk. And I don't know, any of you suffer things like that, or maybe it's only old people like myself. Most of you are young people, so you're fit and fine. Yeah, so I had it once on my left foot, my Achilles tendon. Apparently, it seems to be that I was too eager to exercise. So I had quickly run, and then I had not warmed up. And so my tendon was pulled, and it remained in a locked position. You understand what I'm saying? The tendon was pulled, remained in a locked position, and then it cannot unlock. And imagine trying to walk like that for almost a year. I felt like I was lame on 1 foot. Okay? Yeah. And then we're told that this guy is lame in both feet. Wow. What's he trying to say? He's actually saying, useless son. Even you have this guy, what can you do? He's lame. If you can't walk, if you can't move, what can you be expected to do? Useless son. And then we're told, yeah, where can I find this guy? He is in the house of Machir. So let's ponder for a while. What does it mean to be in the house of Machir? He's telling us that this guy that you are looking and searching for, that you're interested in finding, in searching and calling, he has no home. He is a homeless son with no roof over him. And I just wonder whether, sometimes for most of us, we just thankful there's a place to stay. And I like the fact that GBG is here, because GBG opens up its place for people who want to stay, and I think that's wonderful. I shudder at some point, because there are something like 1,000 people in Singapore who does not have a place to stay. Yeah. Difficult. Homeless. Nobody kind of like you. Nobody kind of wants you. That's a terrible situation to be in. And the thing that follows is this. it's not just that he's at this house of Machir, he is in a place called Debar. And it sounds like a very nice Hebrew name to learn, yeah, itself. But you know what does Debar means? Debar simply means is no pasture. No pasture. It's not just no pasture, because if there is no pasture, if in dry, arid Israel, you can imagine in those days. Don't think about the Israel at Jerusalem that you see today, but you go back to those times in the early days where it is dry, it's dusty. To have no pasture means there's nothing to keep you. There's no agricultural. There's no, grazing of cattle, of sheep, or goats, or whatever the animals that you may want and you need for sustenance for yourself and the community in which you lived in. No pasture. And maybe the best way to name this city or this town is Nothingville. It is nothing. And if you kind of ponder about this for a while, and if you're David, and as you hear this being said to you, it's basically saying, who are you looking for? You're looking for a nothing son. A nothing son. Wow. Is this what you want? Is this what you are looking for? But what really happened? What really happened? Well, in 2 Samuel 4, verse 4, gives us an idea of what happened. And we are told that Jonathan, who is the great friend that has this covenant relationship with David, he had one son. And that son who was born, is now lame in both feet. When he was 5 years old, when the news came to their home that Saul and Jonathan had actually died in the battlefield, then the household panicked. They were afraid. Because if you have been conquered, if you have been defeated, it means soon they'll come to the household. Soon they'll come to the rest of the remaining family and they'll slaughter every one of them. And so as that was unfolding, the one who's nursing, looking after the young baby, 5-year-old, is he 5-year-old? 3. Oh, 2 more years to catch up. 2 more years to catch up. Yeah. My grandson is only 2 years old, so it's also behind time as well. But anyway, we're told that, at 5 years old, as he was trying to run away, something happened. In the chaotic movements that they were taking, he hurt the legs of the poor boy and became disabled. Whatever it might be, maybe he dropped him and it cracked his leg, and because there was no hospital for him to go to or place to nurse, because safety to another destination was far more important than anything else, and they need to get out before the enemy gets in to kill them. And so that's how Mephibosheth inherited the lame feet that he have. Now, we discover that as we kind of go on, the story tells us that, yes, when David, who ponders over the many things that he has heard about his good friend's son, something stirred in him. And so as he was thinking, he did not hesitate for a moment. And so he had him brought all the way from Debar, bring him to where he is. And so it says that Mephibosheth, who then came, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David. He bowed down to pay him honor, and David said, Mephibosheth. And so the reply was, at your service. Now I want us to kind of think for a while that as this encounter was taking place, 2 different perspectives was taking place. First, we want to look at it from the perspective of David. David's excited, isn't it? If you were and you are going to see the son of your friend, you want to kind of know what's going to be like, and you would spare no expense in making sure that he arrives. Well, first of all, Debar to Jerusalem, it's 130 kilometers. Yeah. In those days, how's it like to be able to travel 100? How long does it take to manage that distance? Any of you do morning runs, morning walks, evening cycling, drive the car? Ayo, susah lah ini. But whatever it means, to manage 130 kilometers distance in those days when roads were terrible, when dust was plenty, what do? It takes a long time to get there. But as it was being planned, David was constantly thinking about the opportunity. And by that time, somehow he remembered the name of the son, even though he was not told by everybody else. And so when David saw Mephibosheth, he immediately called his name. That's the perspective of David, because David was excited. David was looking forward to be able to fulfill something that he felt he should do for himself. But I wonder what's it like from the other person's perspective. We are told that yes, when he came in the moment that he saw David, he bowed down because he is in the presence of the king. And so he needs to pay respect. He needs to honor the king. And so that's what he did. And when his name was announced and called for, immediately he says to be attentive and to say, "Here I am, to serve you when you called me." But Mephibosheth wasn't just answering mechanically, but deep inside, he was uncomfortable. He was afraid. He was scared. And somehow that translated it out, and David saw that and felt it. And so David needed to assure him, to tell him, do not be afraid. You do not need to be fearful. You do not need to be too concerned about this, because I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan. And he went on to say a lot more other things to him. But as he says that, Mephibosheth remained bowed down and replied in a very interesting way. And he says, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" You see, Mephibosheth's response was very different. Yes, he was ready to serve the king, to say that, "I'm here at your service, I'm your servant, call me and I'll do it." He bowed himself down, but he actually called himself a dead dog. Now, to do that, he must have recognized the problems that he'd been through, the kind of life that he has been leading on his own since he was 5. The fact that, being able to walk and now unable to walk. To kind of realize, from being healthy and well to become someone who is unhealthy and in a challenging position. And he recognized that he's almost a half-dead dog. Yeah. And it's not just the first time of recognizing who he is. We find in 1 Samuel 24, verse 14 as well, a person recognizing how useless and how hopeless a situation he has found himself to be in. Okay? Well, Mephibosheth's response tells us this, that he actually misses the main point. He missed the forest from the trees. Yes, it is true. As far as Mephibosheth is concerned, throughout his entire life from that moment on, he was afraid that whoever had killed his father and his grandfather would come and kill him as well. Whoever has now become the new king of Israel could also do the same to him and take his life away. All his life, people must have been whispering to him, "Be careful, watch out. If they discover you, it's finished. You're gone. You have no life left itself." And so he lives a life not just in fear, but equally not just in fear, but worse, in misery, not knowing what his end would be. And the saddest thing is that, I just wonder sometimes when we name our children, it's important we put some thought into it. And he was given the name Mephibosheth. Yeah. But you know what Mephibosheth means? The literal translation is one who scatters shame. Wow. One who scatters shame, or a dispeller of shame, or if you like, even another kind of translation would be, he has a mouth of shame, and whatever he talks about, whatever he reveals, whatever he imparts, it tells you everything is bad. He tells you everything is sad. He tells you everything is not in his favor. And that's the kind of life that Mephibosheth has. See, he had a shameful name to begin with. And the worst is, it's now coupled with the fact that he has a shameful and pitiful past that stays with him, that he carries on his shoulder, that he takes it with him wherever he was going. And you notice that what has actually happened also is that in one day, he not only became a cripple, but he became fatherless as well. In his own life. He has become then ostracized by society, and that, and the very greatest shame that he has is that the grandfather who had sinned against the Lord is no longer now in favor. And in fact, the history books have recorded it in a way that adds and compounds to the problem in which he has. And imagine how he feels. Imagine how he has been living in this time and in this era. But God is always interesting, isn't it? That as far as when he moves the circle of influence in the right way, he then rechanges the situation. We find that in verse 9 onwards, we hear of what David was starting to act. He, being the king, summons Debar again and then tell him, I've given you your master's grandson and everything that belonged to Saul and David, to Saul and his family. You and your sons are to farm the land for him, bring in the crops so that they may be provided for, and that for Mephibosheth, as far as I'm concerned, he will always eat at my table. Wow. See, what did David do? Well, David was doing three very important things. First, David extended blessings, the blessing of protection based on covenant loyalty and kindness. He tells Mephibosheth in a very clear way, I will surely show you kindness. And the word that's being used that we have explained and understood it as kindness is a very deep word. It's the word hesed. Okay? Now, hesed is not just about kindness. Hesed is about a deeper covenantal, unfailing steadfastness of two persons coming together, or even persons coming together who have vowed themselves to uphold and hold on to each other. And so hesed is the kind of the level of commitment David is offering to Mephibosheth. He's telling Mephibosheth, as long as I live, I will grant to you the protection that God's favor is with you. And it's going to be there for him all the time. And not only does David impart that protection, David impart also the reversal of the property that has been annexed by the king. And so I will restore all the land for you. And I just wonder whether, in your line of work, if any lawyers you're doing things of that nature, if you say, hey, your grandfather left you this property, but if you don't go and claim it, nobody else would. Or someone has to go apply a probate in order to verify who you are in order that you can then take it. Well, David basically did all that for him and says, yeah, this is not just the land and the property you need to be dreaming about, but now I am returning it to you. Go, enjoy it. The third thing is, not only is he going to be receiving that, but he also gave him the blessing of provisions. Wow. You shall eat at my table regularly. To be able to be in the company, to be hosted by the king, to be there means of a great favor. It means a restoration of something that has broken down. And now you have the opportunity to be able to enjoy something that is due to you, but you have been marginalized, you've been forgotten, but now it comes back to you. Wow. And indeed, you find that as the story goes, is this that, yeah, and I need to read this to you slowly so that we can get the full meaning of what has happened. Yes, your servant will do whatever the Lord tells me to do. And so it tells us that Mephibosheth ate at the David's table. Mephibosheth had a son named Micah. And all the members of the household were servants of Mephibosheth. And now, instead of staying in a place called Debar, now he lives, his postal code is Jerusalem. Wow. And if you look very carefully, the postal code reflects where the king stays. And there he is, always eating at the king's table, and we're reminded again that he was lame in both feet. But you know what's interesting in this outcome is the benefit didn't just touch Mephibosheth. The benefit touched his son, Micah, too. And wow, isn't that a beautiful picture? I don't know, any one of you hungry? Anyone hungry at this time? No, you're not hungry? Oh, you guys must come early, because I had the best sandwich this morning. Yes, I had the best mayonnaise sandwich that came with sliced cucumber. If I'm not mistaken, it also has a very nice tomato. Yeah. Guess who made for me? Nobody? Oh, that's bad. That's bad. Well, Joshua made it for me. It was lovely. Yes. And I must say, it tastes better than this rib eye that you're saying. Yeah. Well, let me continue. Mephibosheth's life changed. Yes, he's moved on. He's been able to now stay in, no longer now having to live a life of fear, because right now he is being honored for the very fact, and the only qualification he has is because he is the son of Jonathan. Yeah. Well, his life changed. His life got better. He was still lame. As I kind of talk about this story and think about this, and I look around all of you, I also ask the question, are we in some ways like Mephibosheth? How is your life like since you know Christ? Are you living a life victoriously, or are there sometimes that we feel a little bit crippled, that our own failings in life deter us from doing better and great and important tasks for the Lord? Do we sometimes feel shameful that we are not doing as good as we should be because of something that has gone wrong? Are we living lives sometimes that we feel that we may have been hurt and we don't know what to do? And that resulted in us being separated from society and community? Are we lamed because of our own shortcomings in life, and that we are held back by our own inadequacies? And the good thing is this: what has said this is God's grace. Something that we don't deserve, something that we don't earn, but something God gives us freely. And to know that when God's grace comes, even when we are not seeking Him, it's a wonderful thing. God does care for all of us. And sometimes we We do not need to remain like Mephibosheth. Really don't need to. Because Romans 8:15 tells us we've not received a spirit of slavery, but we have received a spirit of adoption as sons by which we cry out, Abba, Father. We don't need to be enslaved. The prison bars do not need to hold us back, because the Father wants to release us so that we may enjoy the benefits of sonship with the Father. The Father doing that for us. The heart of sonship is this, is that God is seeking us out. The question really is, have we accepted the kindness of God as the Father? Or do we see him as the fearsome, distant dad who is out there to punish us when things go wrong, when we are to be blamed, when we ourselves have failed to comply with the things that we set as standards that we are not being able to achieve? The sins, my friends, are already dealt with at the cross when Jesus died for us. We do not need to do anything more. We do not need to strive in order to thrive. We are his sons. And of course, daughters who are all here too. My friends, that's the message of sonship. And so let's remember this. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. And that same offer is given to all of us. Amen? Are you going to, we can all enjoy the kind of life that the Father intends us to be. We can be his true sons when we come to acknowledge him as our Father and live with him, live under him, enjoy his grace, and live by the kindness that he extends to us, that we may indeed glorify him. I guess as we come to the end, can I just ask you to be quiet for a while? For me just to be able to pray for you for just a few more minutes. I know it's taking a bit of time, but I just want to pray for you because I just feel excited, not because I'm the oldest among you and got more white hair than anybody else. Maybe soon next time when I come, I've got no hair. But the more important thing is I feel I want to impart a blessing for every one of you here. Can I just invite you to close your eyes? Can you just bow your heads for a while? Can we acknowledge the living presence of Yahweh around us and that is here? He understands every one of us gathered here. It doesn't matter what name we have, and we may not like the name that we've been given. It may not matter even, what kind of experiences we've been through, and we hate ourselves to the fact that, we can be like Mephibosheth. We ended up with lame feet. And who is to be blamed? Someone else is to be blamed. And if we are like that, and we're in that kind of situation, and we might feel defeated, we might feel that life is over. But God is saying no. He will raise up from another quarters people who will call on his name, people who are charged by him to extend his kindness to every one of us. Whether you're a son or a daughter, the Father is saying, I want you, I loved you. My kindness is for you. And I'm establishing this covenant with you, a covenant that you can take away and remember for the rest of your life, that I never will depart from you, and I'll never will shortchange you. And I will fulfill my promise as God the Father to you, my son, and my daughter. And all of God's people say, Amen. Thank you.
Can we thank our speaker again for today's very amazing message?